The air was heavy with heat and dust, the kind that clings to your skin and stays there long after you leave. Trucks lined the edge of the refugee camp, their engines still humming, carrying food, blankets, medicine, and hope, the kind that always arrived too late. Angelina Jolie stepped out quietly. No entourage, no microphones. Just her, a linen shirt rolled at the sleeves, and eyes that had already seen too much. Children ran past, barefoot, shouting in languages she didn't fully understand, but she didn't need translation to feel what was in their voices. She was used to the noise of premieres, cameras, questions, red carpets, the echo of her name shouted by strangers. But here, the noise was different. Here, it was survival. She moved slowly between tents, stopping to listen more than she spoke. A woman handed her a baby wrapped in a faded blue blanket. The baby coughed, eyes dull, but still reached for her necklace, a thin silver chain she'd worn for years. Angelina smiled softly, unclasped it, and let the baby play with it for a moment before the mother pulled him close again. A translator whispered something beside her. "They say you look tired." She laughed under her breath. "Maybe I finally look human." Then, from the crowd of children, a small girl appeared, maybe 8 years old, maybe younger. Her hair was tangled, her face streaked with dust, but her eyes were calm, almost steady in a way that didn't belong to a child. In her hands, she held something wrapped in a piece of torn fabric. Angelina knelt down. "Hi," she said gently. "What's your name?" The girl didn't answer right away. She just looked at her, not with awe, not with fear, but with something else. Recognition, maybe. Then, slowly, she held out the bundle. Inside was a tiny necklace made of string and bottle caps, flattened, scratched, threaded together with bits of plastic and twine. The kind of thing that would never survive a day in the world Angelina came from. The girl said something in a whisper. The translator leaned closer and murmured, "She says she made it for you." Angelina smiled, that real kind of smile that makes the air shift a little. She took the necklace carefully, as if it were gold. "What's your name?" she asked again. The girl finally spoke, barely audible. "Layla." Angelina nodded, slipped the necklace over her head, and said softly, "Thank you, Layla. It's beautiful." The girl's lips twitched into the smallest smile, the first one Angelina saw in that entire camp. For a brief second, the world felt still. No cameras, no borders, no war. Just two people, one giving and one receiving. And a piece of string that somehow meant everything. The sun was setting by the time Angelina reached the edge of the camp. She could still feel the weight of the necklace around her neck, light as air, yet somehow heavier than any jewel she had ever worn. The bottle caps clinked softly against each other when she moved, like a quiet rhythm only she could hear. Layla had run off after giving it to her, disappearing into the maze of tents and laughter. Angelina wanted to find her again, to thank her properly, to take a photo maybe, not for the press, but for herself, a small proof that this moment had happened. But by the time she turned around, the girl was gone. She stayed in the camp for 3 more days. Every morning, Layla appeared for a few seconds, always from a distance, always smiling, always watching her. And every time Angelina raised a hand to wave, the girl would dart behind the tents, shy and quick. On the last day, as Angelina prepared to leave, she spotted the girl again. Layla stood near the edge of the dirt road, the evening wind tugging at her worn dress. Angelina walked over, crouched down so they were eye level. "I'm leaving tomorrow," she said softly, "but I'll come back." The translator repeated her words, and the girl nodded. Then she reached out, her small fingers brushing the necklace on Angelina's collarbone. "Don't forget," Layla whispered. Angelina smiled, touched her cheek, and promised, "I won't." That night, she lay awake in the small UN tent, the air filled with the crackle of generators and the low murmur of distant voices. Outside, the camp lights flickered like tired stars. She held the necklace in her hand, the metal warm from her skin. It wasn't just a gift, it was a memory already trying to stay alive. She thought about how something so fragile could carry such weight, how kindness could exist even in the middle of loss. Before she fell asleep, she whispered into the dark, "Thank you, Layla." The next morning, the camp would be different, louder, emptier, restless. But the necklace would stay with her, not in a jewelry box, not for display, around her neck, against her heartbeat, where memories never fade. The morning she left, the camp didn't sound the same. The songs of children had turned into hurried voices and engines. Trucks groaned as they loaded boxes of supplies. Families packed what little they owned. A few blankets, pots, photos wrapped in plastic. The air was thicker, heavier, like the sky itself knew what was coming. Angelina walked through the rows of tents with her headscarf pulled tight, trying to find Layla one last time. Everywhere she looked, there were faces, frightened, hopeful, numb. But not hers. She stopped near a woman carrying a sleeping child. "Have you seen Layla?" she asked through the translator. The woman shook her head. "Many children have gone with the trucks," she said. "Some didn't make it." Angelina felt her chest tighten. She tried again, searched the makeshift school tent, the kitchen line, the medical post. Nothing. By noon, the soldiers were calling for everyone to clear the area. The UN convoy was leaving, too dangerous to stay. Reporters shouted questions, cameras clicked, dust rose around the wheels of the trucks. She climbed into the back seat of her vehicle, but before closing the door, she turned one last time toward the field of tents. All she could see was the shimmer of heat and fabric in the wind. Somewhere out there was the little girl with the necklace made of bottle caps. The girl who had given her something priceless without knowing what it meant. The driver asked, "Are you ready, Ms. Jolie?" She didn't answer at first. Then she nodded, pressing her hand to her chest where the necklace rested, hidden under her scarf. As the car rolled forward, she whispered quietly, "I'll come back, Layla." But deep down, she knew promises in war zones were fragile things. They cracked easily under the weight of time. The road ahead was endless and red with dust. The farther she went, the smaller the camp became behind her, until it vanished completely. And still, she could feel the soft rattle of the bottle caps. A small, broken rhythm against her heart. The sound of something, or someone, she was already starting to miss. Days later, back in Los Angeles, everything felt wrong. The air was clean, perfumed, still. The city lights looked sterile, too bright, too safe. She stood in front of her bathroom mirror that first night home, still wearing the scarf, the dust from the camp clinging faintly to its edges. Her assistant had already unpacked her bags, cosmetics, notebooks, the envelope of documents from the UN, everything neat, in its place. Except for the necklace. That, she kept in her hand. Under the golden light of the vanity mirror, the little string looked almost out of place. The flattened bottle caps glinted dully against her palm, crude, uneven, nothing that belonged in a world of diamonds and designer gowns. Yet it was the only thing that felt real. She placed it on the counter for a moment, next to a row of expensive perfumes. The contrast was absurd. A child's handmade trinket in the reflection of crystal bottles worth more than the camp's entire supply of medicine. She turned off the light and left the room. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept hearing Layla's voice, "Don't forget me." And the sound of that promise pressed deeper than she'd realized. The next morning, when her stylist came to prepare her for a photo shoot, he noticed something around her neck. It wasn't gold. It wasn't new. It was the same small, frayed necklace, now resting against her skin like a secret. "Miss Jolie," he said carefully, "that doesn't match the outfit." She smiled faintly, still looking in the mirror. "I know," she said. "That's why it stays." He didn't ask again. Throughout the shoot, she wore it under her shirt, invisible to the camera, but they're all the same. Whenever the flashes went off, she thought about Layla, about the dust, the laughter, the tiny hands that had tied that knot. And when the photographer told her, "You look softer today, Angelina," she didn't correct him, because he was right. It wasn't the makeup, or the light, or the dress. It was the necklace, and the memory that refused to fade. Weeks turned into months, but the thought of Layla wouldn't let go. Angelina was back to filming, interviews, flights, the constant rhythm of a life lived in motion. Yet between all of it, she found herself searching. She asked quiet questions at every UN meeting, spoke to field workers, translators, photographers. "Has anyone seen her?" She would ask, showing the one picture she had from that trip, not of Layla, but of the camp, the row of tents, the dusty horizon where the girl might have stood. Most just shook their heads. Some looked away. One field officer told her softly, "Many of those children, they move between camps, sometimes across borders." Angelina nodded, pretending she understood, but the words landed like stones. At night, she would sit by her window overlooking the hills, the city below her sparkling like a universe too far away to touch. She'd take off the necklace, hold it in her hands, and imagine where Layla might be. Was she safe? Was she even alive? And if she wasn't, who would remember her name? One evening, she called the translator from that mission. "Do you remember the girl who gave me the necklace?" she asked. The woman paused. "The little one?" "Yes, she was very sweet." "Do you know what happened to her?" The silence on the line was enough. Angelina pressed her hand to her mouth. "I see," she whispered. The woman added quietly, "Sometimes remembering is the only way to keep them alive." That night, Angelina placed the necklace beside her bed, on top of a folded piece of paper. On it, she wrote one sentence. "Layla, not forgotten." It wasn't a prayer. It wasn't closure. It was a promise, the kind that survives even when people don't. And when she flew out the next morning for another premiere, the necklace went with her, tucked carefully beneath her blouse. Still invisible, still powerful. A heartbeat from a world that never stopped calling her back. The following year blurred into noise, red carpets, camera flashes, speeches that echoed but meant nothing. Angelina smiled when she needed to, spoke about roles, awards, and charity, her voice calm and graceful as always. But somewhere beneath the surface, every word sounded hollow. The world loved to see her glowing, flawless, untouchable. But inside, she was haunted by the memory of a dusty camp where a child with quiet eyes had given her the only thing that ever felt pure. Sometimes, in the middle of interviews, her hand would instinctively brush the necklace hidden beneath her gown. A subconscious gesture, small enough that no one noticed. But every time she touched it, her breath slowed, her answers softened. At one of the premieres, a journalist asked her, "You've been to so many war zones. Doesn't it ever get easier?" She smiled faintly, her eyes distant. "No," she said simply. "And it shouldn't." When the cameras flashed again, she turned her face slightly away from the lights. Behind the diamonds and fabric, the handmade necklace pressed lightly against her skin, grounding her to something real. That night, at the after-party, surrounded by noise and champagne, she slipped into a hallway to be alone. She took out her phone, scrolling past messages and photos, stopping on one folder titled UN Mission, Syria. Inside, hundreds of images, smiling children, destroyed streets, tents under sunburned skies. She lingered on one photo, a group of kids waving at the camera. And there, almost hidden at the edge, a little girl's silhouette, head turned, hair tied with a thin white ribbon. She zoomed in until the pixels blurred. Her throat tightened. It could be anyone, but it didn't matter. She turned off the phone, leaned her head against the wall, and closed her eyes. The music from the party thumped faintly through the door, shallow, forgettable. She whispered under her breath, "You're still here, aren't you?" For a moment, she thought she felt something. Not sound, not presence, but peace. And when she went back inside, her smile looked the same to everyone else. But for the first time in months, it felt real. Months later, during a press tour for her new film, a journalist asked a question she wasn't expecting. They were sitting in a quiet hotel room in Paris, cameras rolling, lights bright, but not harsh. Most of the questions were predictable: fame, family, philanthropy. But then the journalist, a young woman with a nervous smile, looked down at her notes and said softly, "Do you remember a girl named Layla?" Angelina froze. It wasn't a dramatic pause, more like the world briefly stopped breathing. Her fingers, resting on her lap, tightened slightly. "Where did you hear that name?" she asked. The journalist explained that she'd been researching Angelina's early humanitarian work and found an old field report mentioning a Syrian girl, Layla, age 8, gave necklace to visiting ambassador. It was a single line, buried in a document no one had read in years. Angelina smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides an ache. "Yes," she said quietly. "I remember her." The journalist hesitated. "Did you ever find out what happened to her?" Angelina's eyes shifted, not to the camera, not to the interviewer, but somewhere past them both. "No," she said after a long silence. "But I think about her every day." The crew didn't know what to do. The air was different now, fragile, sincere. The journalist, sensing she had stepped into something sacred, lowered her voice. "May I ask, do you still have the necklace?" Angelina nodded. "I wear it sometimes," she said, "when I need to remember what's real." There was no follow-up question. The interviewer turned off the recorder, breaking the silence that lingered like the echo of a prayer. When Angelina left the room, her publicist asked if she was all right. She nodded. Yes, that was a good question. That night, she watched the interview back on her phone before it aired. They'd cut that entire exchange. Too quiet, too personal, not interesting enough. She smiled to herself, shook her head, and whispered, "Good. It wasn't meant for them anyway." Then she reached for the necklace, running her thumb over the worn edges of the bottle caps, each one a small, imperfect circle of memory, and felt, once again, like the woman Layla had seen in her eyes. A few months later, a letter arrived at her foundation's office, handwritten on thin, yellowed paper. No sender's name, no return address. Just one word on the front, pressed hard into the envelope. Layla. Her assistant almost threw it away, thinking it was fan mail, but something about the uneven handwriting caught Angelina's attention. She opened it carefully, afraid of what might be inside, afraid it would be nothing, or worse, something final. The first line made her hands tremble. "If you remember me, please know, I am safe." It wasn't long, just half a page, written in shaky English. Layla explained that her family had been moved to a refugee program years ago and eventually relocated. She was now living in France, studying to become a nurse. "I saw your photo," the letter continued, "and I thought maybe you would like to know that I kept my promise too. I didn't forget you." Angelina read it again and again, tracing the uneven loops of every letter as if they were sacred. The paper smelled faintly of soap and ink, and at the bottom of the page, there was a small, childlike drawing, a necklace made of bottle caps, drawn in blue pen, with the words, "It still shines." Tears blurred her vision. She folded the paper slowly, pressing it against her chest like something fragile. Her assistant asked quietly, "Who is it from?" "An old friend," Angelina said, her voice barely audible. That night, she didn't go out, didn't take calls. She sat by the window with a single candle burning beside her, the letter open on her lap. Outside, Paris was alive. Cars, laughter, a city glowing with its own rhythm. But inside, there was only stillness. She reached for the necklace again, the one that had traveled with her through wars and films and red carpets. It felt lighter now, as if some invisible weight had finally lifted. And for the first time in years, she whispered the name out loud. Layla. It didn't hurt anymore. It sounded like a prayer finally answered. A few weeks after the letter, Angelina's foundation arranged a visit to a small humanitarian clinic outside Lyon. The coordinator mentioned, almost casually, that one of the new volunteers had come from Syria, a girl who grew up in the refugee camps. The name wasn't said at first, but something in Angelina stirred, a quiet pulse of hope she tried not to feel too strongly. When she arrived, the clinic was small, bright, alive with movement. Doctors and nurses moved between rooms. Children played in the courtyard, and the smell of antiseptic mixed with laughter. She greeted staff, shook hands, smiled politely. Then the coordinator led her to a young nurse who was restocking supplies by the window. "Angelina," he said, "this is Layla." Time stopped. The woman turned, grown now, maybe 22, her hair tied back, eyes still steady and calm. For a second, neither of them spoke. Angelina's breath caught in her throat, her mind struggling to reconcile the fragile child she remembered with the woman in front of her, alive, whole, radiant. Layla smiled first. "You came," she said softly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Angelina's eyes filled instantly. She laughed through the tears, stepping forward, pulling the young woman into her arms. It wasn't a cinematic hug, no music, no applause, just the sound of two heartbeats remembering the same promise. When they finally pulled apart, Angelina noticed something. Around Layla's neck hung a thin chain, and on it, a small piece of metal, one of the same bottle caps from all those years ago. "You kept it," Angelina whispered. Layla nodded. "You did too." They both laughed quietly, tears and smiles blending into something sacred. For the rest of the day, they talked in a small corner of the clinic, about the camps, the years in between, the new life she had built. Layla spoke about her work, about wanting to help children who had no one else. "You taught me that," she said, "that sometimes love is just showing up." Before leaving, Angelina pressed something into her hand, a tiny silver charm shaped like a star. "For the next chapter," she said. Layla looked at her with the same calm eye she had as a child and said, "I think this time, I'm the one who won't forget you." And in that quiet room, surrounded by life and healing, Angelina finally felt what she hadn't in years: peace. Months later, Angelina stood before a mirror in her hotel suite in London, preparing for one of the biggest premieres of her career. The stylist moved around her like a quiet storm, adjusting the gown, perfecting every strand of hair, checking the jewelry for the 100th time. Everything was perfect, except the space around her neck. Her stylist held up a velvet tray filled with glittering diamonds. "These were sent specially from Cartier," he said proudly. "They'll photograph beautifully." Angelina looked at them, flawless, cold, shining under the lights, and then reached instead for a small case lying on her dressing table. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was the necklace made of string and bottle caps. The edges were worn now, one of the caps slightly bent, the string darker from time. But it was whole. She picked it up carefully, feeling its familiar weight. The stylist's smile faltered. "You can't wear that, Angelina. It'll clash with the dress." She smiled softly, her reflection calm and steady. "It's not for them," she said. "It's for me." And with that, she fastened it around her neck, under the diamonds, hidden from the cameras, pressed close to her heartbeat. When she stepped out onto the red carpet, the crowd erupted. Flashes exploded, voices shouted her name. Reporters leaned forward to ask questions. She smiled, posed, turned, everything choreographed, everything perfect. But somewhere beneath all that glitter, a small sound followed her. The soft, barely audible clink of metal against string. And though no one could see it, she knew it was there. The necklace that once smelled like dust and sunlight and hope. The necklace that reminded her who she was before the fame, before the noise. Later, during an interview, a journalist asked, "You've worn thousands of jewels. Do any of them mean something special?" Angelina paused for a moment, a faint smile touching her lips. "Yes," she said quietly, "but not the ones you see." The reporter laughed, thinking it was a joke. But the way her eyes lingered, steady and unblinking, made it clear. She wasn't joking at all. After the premiere, she found herself sitting alone on the hotel balcony, still in her gown, her heels kicked off beside the chair. The city below shimmered, black cars, camera flashes fading into the night, the hum of a world that never truly slept. She held a cup of tea between her hands, the necklace warm against her skin. The memory of that day at the camp, the dust, the sun, the little girl with the steady eyes, felt closer now than ever before. Her phone buzzed. A message from Layla. "I saw you on TV. You still wear it, don't you?" Angelina smiled. She typed back, "Always." Then another message came. "Do you ever think about going back?" Her fingers froze over the screen. She looked out across the skyline, at all the lights, all the noise, and thought about the silence of that old camp, the sound of laughter breaking through fear, the smell of dust that had once clung to her sleeves. "Every day," she wrote back. "But maybe this time, I'll take you with me." There was a long pause, then 3 small dots appeared, blinking, disappearing, blinking again. "I'd like that," Layla finally replied. Angelina leaned back in her chair, her heart both heavy and light. For years, the necklace had been a reminder of loss. But now it felt like a bridge. Somewhere out there, in another city, another time zone, the girl who had once given her hope was alive, dreaming, helping others. And the circle had closed in the quietest, most beautiful way. She whispered to herself, "Some stories don't end, they just return." And when the wind shifted, brushing her hair across her face, she could almost hear Layla's laughter again. Soft, distant, but still alive. A year later, Angelina stood once again in the desert. Different camp, different faces, but the same dry wind, the same sound of children's laughter cutting through the air like music that refused to die. Layla walked beside her, older now, confident, her nurse's uniform stained with dust and sunlight. They moved slowly between the tents, handing out supplies, checking on families. The people recognized Angelina instantly, but this time she wasn't the center of attention. Layla was. Children followed her, clinging to her sleeves, laughing at her accent when she spoke their language with kindness and effort. And Angelina just watched, quiet, proud, moved in a way that words couldn't carry. When the sun began to sink, painting the horizon in gold and crimson, the two of them sat together on a wooden crate near the edge of the camp. The same sky stretched above them that had once watched them meet. Vast, merciful, eternal. Angelina reached into her pocket and pulled out the necklace. The string was frayed, one of the bottle caps missing. It had lived a full life. She placed it gently in Layla's palm. "I think," she said softly, "it's yours again." Layla looked down at it, and for a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she shook her head, closing Angelina's hand around it. "No," she said. "It's ours. You carried it when I couldn't. Now we both do." Angelina's eyes shimmered. Together then. They sat there as the sky dimmed, watching the camp lights flicker on. The same fragile glow that once marked survival, now glowing with something stronger, life. No cameras, no red carpet, no applause. Just two people who had once been strangers. Their stories stitched together by a thread of kindness and faith. As they stood to leave, the wind lifted a swirl of dust around them. And for a moment, it almost looked like light. Angelina touched her chest, feeling the space where the necklace had always rested. It wasn't there anymore, but the warmth remained. Because some memories don't live in what you keep. They live in what you give back.